They say California is where dreams come true. But here, the dead still whisper and nightmares walk in daylight. These aren't just ghost stories. These are real, and they're waiting for you. Down forgotten highways and behind locked doors, something waits. A cell door still slams shut in an abandoned prison, even though no one's walked those halls in decades. A child's laughter echoes through a house where no child ever lived. Hotels where guests check in and leave shaken. Cold hands gripping their ankles in the dead of night. This isn't folklore passed down to scare kids. These are real places, real encounters, real fear. Welcome to Real Ghost Stories, where we reveal the chilling truth behind America's most haunted locations. If you crave real paranormal encounters, twisted history, and stories that stay with you long after the lights go out, subscribe now and let the nightmares begin. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on California's most haunted grounds. 15 locations soaked in tragedy, mystery, and something no one can explain. But our final location? It's so disturbing. Even seasoned investigators refuse to return. If you're still here by the end, just pray the silence around you stays that way. Haunted place number 1, the Whaley House Museum, San Diego. There's a house in San Diego where the walls don't just hold history, they echo with it. Step inside, and it feels like time doesn't just stop, it repeats, over and over again. The same footsteps, the same whispers, the same screams. The Whaley House, built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley on the site of a former public execution ground, a literal hanging platform. This home wasn't just born from wood and brick, it was soaked in death before the first nail was ever struck. The land itself was cursed long before the Whaley family laid a single stone. In 1852, a man named James Yankee Jim Robinson, a drifter and convicted thief, was sentenced to hang. He was too tall for the gallows. As he dropped, his toes scraped the ground. It took nearly 45 agonizing minutes for him to die. He didn't go quietly, and witnesses say he made sure he wouldn't stay quiet. When Thomas Whaley started construction just a few years later, neighbors warned him, but he didn't listen. Almost immediately after moving in, he and his wife began hearing heavy boots stomping across the upper floor, even though no one was up there. Thomas was convinced it was Yankee Jim, and he wasn't alone. Then came the tragedies. The Whaley's youngest son, Thomas Jr., died from scarlet fever at just 18 months. A few years later, their daughter, Violet, shot herself in the chest after a failed marriage, her blood soaking into the floorboards. Her suicide note simply read, "Mad from life's history, swift to death's mystery." The family barely had time to grieve before the house turned darker. Over the decades, guests, staff, and even police officers have reported the same things again and again. Doors slam violently with no wind. The scent of cigar smoke and lavender perfume lingers in empty rooms. Cold spots grip your spine like icy fingers. A child's laugh echoes from the stairwell, even when the house is locked and empty. And then there's the piano. There is no piano in the Whaley House, but people still hear it. A soft, mournful tune playing in the dead of night, usually accompanied by the cry of a child. Some say it's young Thomas Jr. playing for his sister Violet. Others believe it's something else entirely. One visitor in 2008 claimed she saw a woman in Victorian dress standing at the top of the stairs, staring down. When the woman turned and vanished, the air dropped 10 degrees, and her camera died instantly. "It felt like the house was watching me," she wrote later. Not the people of the house. The most haunted room? That would be the courtroom, built inside the house during its time as San Diego's first county courthouse. Visitors report seeing spectral jurors seated in silence. A judge's gavel is sometimes heard pounding, though the courtroom hasn't held a case in over a century. Paranormal investigators have recorded extreme EMF spikes, captured EVPs of moaning voices, and even caught a full-bodied apparition on thermal camera, pacing back and forth in the hallway where Yankee Jim was believed to have walked. To this day, no explanation has ever been given for the sounds of chains dragging across the floor at 3 a.m. Why would a family stay in such a place? Maybe they couldn't leave. Or maybe the house never let them. What's certain is this: the Whaley House doesn't rest. And if you spend enough time inside, you won't either. Haunted place number 2, the Queen Mary, Long Beach. They call her the Gray Ghost, not because of how she moved, but because of what still moves inside her. Anchored off the coast of Long Beach, California, the Queen Mary may look like a retired luxury ocean liner turned hotel, but make no mistake, this ship doesn't sleep, and neither will you. She's bigger than the Titanic. She sailed during a world war. And for nearly a century, death has clung to her decks like rust. More than 150 documented deaths have occurred on this vessel. Sailors were crushed, children drowned, and soldiers were lost at sea. And now, the Queen Mary is alive with the past. The Queen Mary was built in 1936 in Clydebank, Scotland, a marvel of maritime engineering and the pride of the Cunard Line. She was the epitome of elegance: grand ballrooms, marble floors, sweeping staircases, and rich mahogany everywhere. She hosted celebrities like Clark Gable, Winston Churchill, and even royalty. But her beauty masked what was to come. When World War II broke out, she was stripped of her luxury and painted navy gray. Now a troop transport ship, she carried over 800,000 Allied soldiers and was nicknamed the Gray Ghost for her speed and stealth across the Atlantic. But war stains everything. In 1942, during a tragic naval accident off the coast of Ireland, the Queen Mary accidentally sliced through her escort ship, HMS Curacao, cutting it in half. Over 330 sailors died instantly. The Queen Mary was ordered not to stop, not even to search for survivors. She steamed on, leaving behind a sea of bodies. Many say their souls never left her hull. When the war ended, the Queen Mary returned to her glamorous ocean liner life, but the darkness stayed. By 1967, she was permanently docked in Long Beach. That's when the hauntings began, at full force. Let's talk about Door 13. It's deep in the bowels of the ship, in the engine room. There, a young sailor was crushed to death, instantly decapitated during a routine drill. Now, visitors report seeing a man in blue coveralls walking the corridor, only to vanish near the very door that ended his life. Some hear footsteps behind them, slow and heavy, but when they turn around, no one's there. And then there's stateroom B340, so haunted it was closed to the public for nearly 30 years. Guests complained of lights flickering, blankets ripped off in the middle of the night, footsteps pacing the floor, and violent knocks on the walls. Faucets turn on by themselves. The bathroom lights turn off suddenly. One woman swore she saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed, staring, just breathing. Paranormal investigators recorded violent EMF surges, strange growls, and even scratch marks on walls where no one had touched. But that's not all. The ship once held a lavish first-class swimming pool. It's now dry and sealed off. But visitors still hear the unmistakable sounds of splashing water, wet footprints that appear and vanish in seconds, and the laughter of children. One spirit is especially known here, a little girl named Jackie, who allegedly drowned in that pool in the 1940s. She's often heard calling out for her mommy, her voice echoing across the empty chamber. Some claim to have even seen her tiny handprints on the glass windows nearby. A retired tour guide once said, "Jackie always follows me. I talk to her, and she answers back. Not with words, but she lets me know she's there." There are stories of ghostly soldiers in uniform, a lady in white wandering the ship's bow, and phantom screams coming from the old infirmary, where wounded troops once died en route. But the eeriest thing? No matter how many times the Queen Mary is blessed, cleansed, or investigated, the activity never stops. In fact, it intensifies. Guests who come looking for answers often leave with more questions, or something worse. Some report feeling watched constantly, waking up with bruises, or even being pushed down narrow staircases. One overnight guest claimed she woke to the sound of a child crying in her closet. But when she opened it, she didn't find a child. She found an ice-cold draft and something that whispered her name. To this day, no one knows exactly how many spirits roam the decks of the Queen Mary. But every door you walk past, every hallway you enter, someone may already be there, watching. So ask yourself, if this ship carried the living through war and luxury, who or what is she carrying now? And if you step aboard, will she let you leave? Haunted place number 3, Alcatraz Island, San Francisco Bay. You can hear it before you see it. That low hum of wind howling through rusted bars, the moan of a foghorn echoing off the water, and somewhere beneath it all, a whisper that doesn't belong to the living. This is Alcatraz, the Rock, a fortress of steel and stone, surrounded by frigid, shark-infested waters, isolated, impenetrable, and utterly cursed. It's not just the history that keeps people awake at night. It's the one still inside. Alcatraz began its life not as a prison, but as a military fortress. Built in 1859, it was fortified to protect the Bay Area during the Civil War. By 1868, it became a military prison, and in 1934, it was transformed into the most feared federal penitentiary in the United States, reserved for the country's most violent, unrepentant, and uncontrollable criminals. This was not just a prison. It was a tomb with no key. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, Roy Gardner, Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. These were the monsters that America couldn't cage anywhere else. They were sent here to rot, and some never left. D-Block, the name alone strikes terror. This is where inmates were sent for solitary confinement. The Hole, tiny, cold, pitch-black cells, some with no toilets, no light, no sound. Just a man and his mind. And for some, that mind broke. Cell 14D is the most infamous. Visitors often report sudden nausea, dizziness, and a drop in temperature as they approach it. Some say they can feel something breathing down their neck, even though the cell is empty. In the 1940s, an inmate was thrown into 14D for punishment. That night, guards heard him screaming that something with glowing eyes was in the cell with him. He begged for help, but no one came. By morning, he was dead, strangled. The official report claimed natural causes, but every guard swore he had fresh handprints around his neck. The hauntings aren't confined to the cells. The mess hall, the warden's house, and the laundry room all carry their own ghosts. Disembodied voices, chains rattling, men sobbing, doors slamming, footsteps in empty hallways. Visitors often report cold gusts of air, even on hot summer days. Paranormal investigators have documented unexplained EMF spikes, EVP recordings of voices whispering names, and even full-body apparitions captured on thermal imaging. And then there's Capone. Al Capone served his final prison sentence here, and he was a wreck. He refused to use the yard, fearing someone might stab him. But more disturbing than his paranoia were the nights he was heard screaming inside his cell, begging someone named Jimmy to leave him alone. He claimed it was Jimmy Clark, a man gunned down in the St. Valentine's Day massacre, one of Capone's own victims. The prison doctor chalked it up to advanced syphilis. But guards swore Capone was talking to someone. Even in the prison's final days, staff claimed to hear the faint notes of a banjo echoing from the showers, Capone's favorite instrument, long after he was gone. When Alcatraz closed its doors in 1963, it was supposed to mark the end of an era. Instead, it became something far more sinister. Now a tourist destination, the island draws thousands every year. Many come for the history, but a few leave with something else. A woman touring the D Block fainted while standing in 14D. She claimed a cold hand gripped her wrist, a hand that left red finger marks for days. Another visitor took a photo of the hallway. When she reviewed it later, there was a figure in guard uniform standing by the cell gate, a man no one saw in person. Staff have gone entire nights hearing voices echoing from the old hospital wing, a room locked tight for decades. But perhaps the most chilling detail? Alcatraz is made of concrete and steel. There's nowhere to hide. Every sound echoes. Every breath is heard. So when the lights go out and you hear footsteps, When you feel someone watching from the shadows, when you hear someone whisper your name, you know one thing for sure: you're not alone. And out here on the bay, surrounded by miles of cold, black water, no one can hear you scream. Haunted place number 4, Preston Castle, Ione, California. They called it a school, but there were no ordinary lessons here. Only pain, punishment, and whispers that still echo through the stone corridors, long after the doors were locked shut. Welcome to Preston Castle, an ominous Victorian fortress rising from the dry hills of Ione, California. It was meant to be a place of rehabilitation for wayward boys. But what unfolded within its red-bricked walls was something far more twisted and far more terrifying. Built in 1890 and opened to inmates by 1894, Preston Castle was officially known as the Preston School of Industry, one of California's first juvenile reformatories. It promised to teach troubled boys discipline, work ethic, and moral values. But what they received was far from redemption. They came here for stealing, fighting, even truancy. Some were as young as 12 years old. They entered with bruises from home and left with scars from Preston. Reports over the years exposed brutal punishments. Boys shackled in solitary confinement, forced labor in grueling heat, beatings behind closed doors, and endless psychological torment. And then, in 1950, came the murder that would stain the castle forever. Anna Corbin. She was a kind soul, a housekeeper known for treating the boys with compassion, warmth, and dignity. But in February of that year, she disappeared inside the castle. Her lifeless body was found days later, shoved into a supply closet near the kitchen. She had been beaten, strangled, and dragged across the floor, her long hair still caught in the linoleum grooves. No one was ever convicted. The suspect, Eugene Monroe, a 19-year-old ward of the school, was tried and acquitted 3 times. To this day, her murder remains unsolved. But those who walk the halls say Anna never left. Paranormal investigators and visitors alike report chilling activity centered around the kitchen, where Anna's body was discovered. They describe sudden cold spots, even in the middle of summer. Disembodied whispers float through the air, often calling out names or pleading for help. Some claim to have seen the full apparition of Anna, a faint figure in a long dress, gliding silently past the pantry. But it's not just Anna. In the old dormitories, once packed with rows of bunk beds and frightened boys, you can still hear the sound of children sobbing, of tiny footsteps, and sometimes the giggling of boys playing a game no one can see. Investigators have reported objects flying off shelves, doors slamming shut, and unseen hands brushing against their arms in the pitch dark. More than once, visitors have fled the castle after experiencing sudden violent nausea, intense headaches, or overwhelming feelings of being watched. Some report being shoved hard with no one behind them. In one incident, a paranormal team recorded an EVP session in Anna's kitchen. When they asked, "Who killed you, Anna?" the audio playback revealed a raspy whisper. "He's here." Seconds later, their cameras malfunctioned. All power cut out, and a team member began choking, unable to breathe, eyes wide with terror, clutching at their throat. No marks were ever found, but she refused to enter the building again. What makes Preston Castle so disturbing isn't just its history. It's that the pain remains. It clings to the wallpaper. It hangs in the air. It fills the staircases with shadows and fear. And when you stand alone in the darkened hallway, where hundreds of boys once cried themselves to sleep, you begin to understand why this place never found peace. Why Anna still calls out. Why the boys still run. And why something angrier is now moving through the castle. They built Preston to fix broken souls. Instead, they buried them in brick and silence. And sometimes late at night, that silence is broken by a scream. No one alive is supposed to be there, but that doesn't mean the place is empty. Haunted place number 5, the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, Los Angeles. They came here chasing fame. The lights, the cameras, the flashbulbs, and red carpets. But not every star fades quietly. Some leave behind more than a legacy. They leave behind themselves. Welcome to the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, where the echoes of old Hollywood never stopped, and neither did the spirits. Standing tall on Hollywood Boulevard, just across from the Walk of Fame, the Roosevelt has loomed large since 1927. Named after President Theodore Roosevelt, it was born in an era of roaring jazz and golden dreams, opening its doors as the most luxurious hotel in Los Angeles. It was here that the first ever Academy Awards were held in 1929 in the hotel's Blossom Room. Only 270 people attended. It lasted 15 minutes. But what never ended was the connection between this building and the stars who passed through it, in life and death. The Roosevelt was home, even if briefly, to some of the most iconic names in American history. But one name still draws gasps: Marilyn Monroe. During her rise to stardom, Monroe lived in room 1200, a poolside suite with large mirrors and bright morning sun. Today, the mirror that once hung in her room sits in the hotel lobby. And that's where it gets strange. Guests have stared into that mirror and seen more than their own reflection. Multiple reports, dating back decades, describe the sudden appearance of a blonde woman, delicate features, red lips, and sorrowful eyes. When they turn to look behind them, no one is there. But when they look back, she is. Staff say the mirror was removed after too many guests complained of a woman silently watching them, even when alone. And she's not the only one wandering the halls. In room 928, the spirit of actor Montgomery Clift has never checked out. Clift stayed there while filming From Here to Eternity, pacing, rehearsing lines, practicing his trumpet. Guests who stay in a room today report hearing muffled trumpet notes, echoing footsteps, and even feeling a sudden weight sit at the end of their bed, as if someone unseen is resting there. One woman claimed she awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of soft breathing in her ear. When she turned the light on, she was alone, but the sheets beside her were still warm. Then there's Caroline, described as a little girl no older than 6, with long blonde hair and a blue dress. She's often seen in the hallways and lobby, looking lost. She asks guests, "Have you seen my mommy?" Some have responded. Others say she simply fades away, vanishing like fog in the California sun. Children who visit the hotel often mention a nice girl who wants to play hide and seek. Parents, however, never see her, and security footage has occasionally picked up a small, fast-moving blur, darting just out of frame. Lights flicker with no cause. Phones ring in the middle of the night, with nothing but static on the other end. Footsteps echo down empty corridors. Room temperatures drop to chilling lows, even in the middle of summer. One guest staying on the 9th floor reported seeing a woman walk directly through her closed hotel room door. Another woke to find all the drawers in the room open, with her clothes laid out neatly on the floor. She was alone. The Roosevelt is a Hollywood institution, a timeless symbol of glamour and history. But behind the polished marble and red velvet curtains, there are things that linger, things that whisper in the dark, things that wait in mirrors. Not every guest came here to rest. Some came to be remembered, and some never left. Haunted Place Number 6, Bodie State Historic Park. They struck gold here once. Now, all that's left is silence. A stillness so thick it clings to your skin. And eyes in every broken window that never blink. This is Bodie, a town abandoned but never empty. Nestled high in the Sierra Nevada mountains, near the California-Nevada border, Bodie was once a blazing beacon of the gold rush. Founded in 1859 after prospectors discovered glimmers of gold in the hills. By the late 1870s, Bodie had exploded into a violent, chaotic boomtown with a population of nearly 10,000 souls. It had 65 saloons, a red light district that thrived, and a reputation for lawlessness, murder, and vice. It was said that a man could get shot over a poker game and be buried before sunset, no questions asked. Locals whispered a grim motto, "Goodbye, God, we're going to Bodie." But as the gold dried up, so did the town. By the 1940s, Bodie was a ghost of itself, and then just a ghost. Today, Bodie is frozen in time, preserved as a state historic park in a condition known as arrested decay. Buildings lean on brittle frames. Rusting beds, dusty shoes, shattered pianos, everything left as it was when the last residents fled. It looks dead, but somehow alive. And the moment you enter, you feel it. A heaviness, a charge in the air, and the unshakable sensation that someone or something is watching. Legend has it, Bodie is cursed. Visitors who remove anything, a rock, a nail, even a splinter of wood, report a string of unexplainable disasters, car accidents, illness, house fires, divorce, even death. Rangers receive dozens of letters every year from tourists begging to return stolen items. Some are mailed anonymously. Others come with frantic confessions. Since I took this nail, my life has fallen apart. Please put this back where it belongs. I'm sorry. The items are quietly returned to the town, but whether the curse lifts, no one truly knows. The J.S. Kane House, still standing tall near the heart of Bodie, is said to be one of its most haunted locations. People tell of a Chinese maid, believed to have died in the home, appearing to young children, gently touching their hands or calling their names in a soft voice. A family who once stayed overnight inside the house, back when it was used by park caretakers, reported banging doors, cold spots, and the sound of someone sweeping the floor in the dead of night. The child of that family woke screaming, saying, "The lady won't stop staring at me." They never returned. At the Mendocini house, laughter rings through the empty air, the laughter of children long buried. No one lives there, but many have heard footsteps racing upstairs, windows rattling as if tiny hands press against the glass, and the sound of marbles rolling across the wooden floor. Yet when they check, there's nothing. No toys, no children, just dust and silence and something waiting. People have seen shadows dart between buildings, felt invisible fingers tug on their jackets, and caught glimpses of faces peering from behind curtains, faces that vanish when approached. Ghost hunters report spikes in EMF readings, EVP sessions capturing the words leave or buried. And there's a strange effect many describe when entering the town. Their ears pop, their skin prickles, their breath shortens, as if the very land itself doesn't want them there. But perhaps the most terrifying thing about Bodie is the feeling that it's still waiting for something. A town suspended between worlds, neither alive nor fully dead. Maybe it's the greed that poisoned the hills. Maybe it's the blood that soaked its streets. Or maybe it's all the souls still wandering, searching, trapped in the rust and rot. And if you leave with more than memories, even a pebble, Bodie might just follow you home. Haunted Place Number 7, Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. They say guilt has a weight. But what if it also had walls, ceilings, staircases, doors to nowhere? What if it demanded bricks and nails, day after day, for nearly 4 decades? Welcome to the Winchester Mystery House. Not just a mansion, but a monument to madness, fear, and perhaps something else. It began with Sarah Winchester, widow of William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the gun that won the West. When her husband and infant daughter died in the late 1800s, Sarah was devastated, but she wasn't just grieving. She was terrified. A Boston medium told her she was being haunted, not just by tragedy, but by the countless souls taken by the Winchester rifle. The medium's advice? Move west, build a house, and never stop building. Only by building, continuously, without pause, could Sarah appease the dead. Only then would their whispers quiet. And so she did. In 1884, Sarah purchased an unfinished 8-room farmhouse in San Jose, California. And then she built, day and night, without interruption, for 38 years. When she died in 1922, the house had ballooned into a sprawling 160-room maze, filled with architectural impossibilities, staircases leading into solid ceilings, doors that opened to brick walls. or sudden drops in thin air windows built into the floor's secret passageways hidden behind panels and closets, rooms within rooms, layered like a puzzle that was never meant to be solved. No blueprints, no master plan, just construction for the sake of protection. But protection from what, exactly? Visitors and staff have reported chilling phenomena throughout the mansion. Cold spots that follow you like a shadow. Footsteps pacing just above your head in rooms that no longer exist. Whispers that seem to come from inside the walls. And sometimes a soft sigh just behind your ear when no one else is there. In this seance room, where Sarah is said to have communicated with spirits, the energy is different. People say time feels wrong in there. One tour guide quit after hearing a man sobbing uncontrollably, though she was the only one in the house. Another refused to enter again after seeing a dark silhouette vanish through a wall. Security guards at night report phantom footsteps echoing down empty corridors. They followed them, only to find no one. Lights flicker without cause. Tools vanish, only to be found days later, locked in sealed rooms. One former caretaker swears he saw a handprint appear on the dusty window of an upstairs room, on the inside, moments after hearing what he thought was a child humming. And there's the third-floor hallway, where Sarah was said to spend most of her time. Visitors report feeling suddenly dizzy or overwhelmed with sadness. Some say they've seen her, a small woman in black, quietly walking through the halls, head down, lips moving as if in silent prayer, and then gone. But here's the question. Was Sarah mad, or did she know something we don't? Was she hiding from her guilt, or the ghosts her fortune created? To this day, the mansion stands as a twisted labyrinth of grief, paranoia, and the eternal unknown. And whether it was the product of obsession or a true spiritual reckoning, one thing is clear. The Winchester house was never finished, because the dead were never satisfied. And if you visit, listen closely. You might hear the hammering still. Haunted place number 8, Hotel del Coronado, San Diego. She checked in alone. She never checked out. And if you're ever assigned room 3327, don't be surprised if the lights flicker, your TV changes channels without warning, or you feel a cold breath on your neck when no one else is around. This is the haunting of Kate Morgan, and a legendary ghost story behind the Hotel del Coronado. Rising like a red-roofed cathedral by the sea, the Hotel del Coronado has welcomed presidents, royalty, and Hollywood's elite since opening in 1888. With its grand Victorian design and oceanfront elegance, it was, and still is, one of California's most iconic resorts. But beneath the glittering chandeliers and sun-drenched verandas lies a mystery over a century old, and a ghost who still waits for answers. November 24th, 1892, a young woman checked in under the name Lottie A. Bernard. She traveled alone, pale and visibly unwell, claiming she was waiting for her brother, a doctor, to join her. He never arrived. For 5 days, she wandered the hotel's halls, clutching her stomach in pain, asking about telegrams that never came, growing more anxious by the hour. Then, on the morning of November 29th, her body was found slumped on the exterior stairs near the beach. A bullet wound to her right temple, a small handgun nearby. The coroner called it suicide. But locals whispered of foul play, a lover's betrayal, a secret pregnancy, a mysterious man seen leaving the hotel the night before. Even her true name wasn't confirmed until much later. Kate Morgan, a 24-year-old maid from Iowa. And some say she never left. Guests in room 3327, the very room where Kate stayed, report a flurry of unexplained activity. Lights flicker on and off, even when the bulbs are new. The TV turns itself on, blasting static at 3 a.m. Objects vanish, only to be found hours later in strange places. The bathroom mirror fogs over, and sometimes a woman's face appears, one that isn't their own. A hotel staff member once swore she saw a lady in black glide across the hallway outside the room, but when she followed, the corridor was empty and ice cold. One guest wrote in the room's guest book. I woke in the middle of the night and saw a woman at the foot of my bed. She looked sad, almost pleading, and when I turned on the light, she vanished. Others have described hearing a woman sobbing softly or whispers in the bathroom, though no one else was in the room. Downstairs, near the stairs where Kate died, there are cold drafts on warm days. Children cry suddenly when passing through. One visitor claims she was pushed gently but firmly, as if someone didn't want her to linger too long. Paranormal investigators have detected EMF spikes, temperature drops, and caught strange EVP recordings. One in particular chillingly said, "He lied to me." Some believe Kate still wanders the halls, looking for the man who left her, or the justice she was never given. Others say she's trapped by pain, a spirit locked in time, forever reliving her final days. But whether you believe she was a heartbroken woman or the victim of something more sinister, one truth remains. Room 3327 isn't just haunted. It's hers. And if you spend the night, you might not sleep alone. Haunted Place Number 9, Point Reyes Lighthouse. Point Reyes Station, California. There's a place where the wind never stops screaming, where fog chokes the daylight, and the sea below gnaws at jagged rocks like an open grave. Out on the edge of America, where land surrenders to ocean, stands the Point Reyes Lighthouse, weather-beaten, remote, and soaked in sorrow. Some come for the view. Others feel they're being watched. Built in 1870, the lighthouse was a desperate answer to a deadly question. How many more ships must disappear before this coast learns to speak in light? Point Reyes is one of the foggiest places in North America. The winds here reach hurricane force. The currents, unpredictable and brutal. Countless vessels were swallowed by the Pacific long before this tower stood sentry. And even after the light was lit, the ocean still took what it wanted. In the days before automation, this lighthouse wasn't just a station. It was a sentence. Assigned keepers endured relentless isolation, cut off from the world, battered by wind, haunted by silence. Days blurred into weeks. Months passed like ghosts. Many fell into despair. A few into madness. And some never made it back. There are no friendly ghosts here. Just the steady echo of footsteps in an empty tower. The icy brush of wind inside sealed chambers. And the overwhelming sense that you're not alone. Not ever. Even when no one else is around. Visitors have described pressure on their chest, shadows where there should be light, and a paralyzing sensation of being followed down the 308 steps that lead to the keeper's quarters. And it's not uncommon to hear something knocking on the heavy door after dark, even when there's no one left at the station. One ranger recalled, "I did a night patrol years ago, thought I was alone, heard someone whisper behind me on the spiral stairs. Turn around, no one there, but the voice said my name." Others speak of a moaning wind that sounds almost human, or a face glimpsed for half a second through the lens room glass, pale, wet, and watching. You won't find a ghost named on the brochures. There are no tragic love stories here, no blood-stained letters, only salt, fog, and the uneasy feeling that the sea doesn't forget. And neither do those that drowned. The Point Reyes Lighthouse doesn't cry out for attention. It simply waits. And sometimes it remembers too loudly. So if you ever stand there alone and the wind suddenly dies, don't speak. Listen. You may hear the footsteps of a keeper who never left his post, or the final prayers of a shipwrecked sailor, swallowed by the fog, still searching for light that came too late. Haunted Place Number 10, the Cecil Hotel, Los Angeles. If evil had an address, if despair needed a home, it would be found at 640 South Main Street in downtown Los Angeles, inside a towering 14-story monument of misery known as the Cecil Hotel. This place doesn't just have a dark history. It swallows history whole. Since the 1920s, it has stood like a cursed tombstone on Skid Row, hiding horror behind its fading Art Deco walls. And the deeper you go, the worse it gets. Some places are accidentally haunted. The Cecil feels deliberate. Opened in 1927, the hotel was meant to be a shining symbol of luxury and wealth. Marble lobby, stained glass windows, 700 rooms ready to host high society. But the glory didn't last. When the Great Depression hit, Main Street turned into a dumping ground for the desperate. Crime, addiction, and poverty choked the life out of the district. The Cecil didn't just fall, it descended. By the 1930s, it had become a magnet for death. By the 1960s, locals started calling it the Suicide Hotel. At least 16 known suicides occurred here. Maybe more. People leapt from upper floors and splattered across the sidewalks. Others swallowed poison or sliced themselves apart in the bathtubs. And not all of them went willingly. In 1944, a woman named Dorothy Jean Purcell gave birth to a baby boy inside the hotel and threw the newborn out the window. In 1964, a retired telephone operator named Pigeon Goldie Osgood was found raped, beaten, and murdered in her room. The crime was never solved, and that's not even the worst of it. In the mid-1980s, the Cecil became home to one of the most sadistic serial killers in American history, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He would return to his 14th-floor room covered in blood, strip off his clothes, and walk half-naked through the lobby. No one stopped him. And just a few years later, Jack Utterweger, another serial killer, stayed at the Cecil while killing sex workers across L.A., even using a red rope, just like the murders he committed in Austria. Two monsters, one hotel, coincidence or something worse. But then came 2013, and everything changed. Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian college student, checked into the Cecil while traveling alone. She was last seen alive on security camera footage in an elevator. That video is now internet legend. She presses every button, pokes her head into the hallway, retreats, hides, gestures wildly, and moves like she's being followed or controlled by something no one else could see. Then she vanishes. 19 days later, her body was found floating naked in a water tank on the hotel's roof. Guests had been drinking and bathing in that water for weeks. The rooftop was locked. The hatch, too heavy for her to close from the inside. There was no explanation, no conclusive cause of death. Since then, room 412, where Elisa stayed, has been the source of violent headaches, sudden nausea, and electronic malfunctions for more than one visitor. Staff have reported lights flickering in empty halls, cold pockets of air in sealed rooms, and shadowy figures that disappear when approached. Some say the entire 15th floor is alive with whispers. Others hear screams echo from the walls after midnight. But when they check, every room is empty. One former night manager said, "It's not the people I'm afraid of here. It's the things that move when no one's there, the things that know your name." And despite all of this, the Cecil keeps operating. New names, new paint, same evil underneath. Some say the place is cursed. Others believe it's a spiritual sinkhole where trauma collects like water in a bowl and dark energy builds over time. But no one has an answer to the biggest question. Why do so many people come here and never leave the same? Some by suicide, some by violence, some, like Elisa Lam, through means no one can explain. The Cecil isn't just haunted, it hunts. And if you spend the night there, you might not be the one dreaming. The building might be dreaming you. Haunted Place Number 11, USS Hornet Sea, Air and Space Museum, Alameda. If steel could remember, if iron could feel pain, then the USS Hornet would be screaming. This isn't just a warship. It's a graveyard with an engine room. A floating colossus forged in fire, loss, and silence. Now, docked in Alameda, California, like a massive tomb on the bay. They call it a museum. But long after the tours end and the last footsteps fade from the deck, something else moves beneath the surface. Commissioned in 1943, the USS Hornet, CV-12, was the 8th ship to bear the name. Rising from the ashes after its predecessor was sunk in battle. What followed was a legacy of death and duty. She fought in the brutal waters of the Pacific during World War II, participated in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and launched some of the deadliest airstrikes in U.S. Navy history. Her decks were soaked in sweat, oil, and blood. Over 300 crew members died aboard this vessel, from combat, aircraft accidents, machinery failures, and suicides. Some never left. They still haven't. After World War II, the Hornet recovered the astronauts of Apollo 11 and Apollo 12, the first men to walk on the moon. Glory, patriotism, triumph. But even then, the whispers never stopped. Today, the USS Hornet rests quietly at Pier 3. But quiet doesn't mean empty. Visitors and crew alike report the same things, over and over, for decades. In the catapult room, a figure has been seen pacing in silence, his head cleanly missing from his shoulders. No one knows his name or what exactly happened during a malfunction long ago. Down in the fire room, tools clang against metal, levers snap, and heavy footsteps echo in the dark. But when the lights come on, no one's there. One of the most persistent ghosts, a young sailor in perfect white dress uniform, standing near the flight deck. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. But the moment anyone approaches, he vanishes into thin air, leaving only the scent of oil and seawater behind. Ghost hunters who visit the Hornet often capture EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, crackling messages, fragments of voices, whispers that answer questions no one should have heard. Cold spots drift through the ship like phantom fog. Cameras glitch. Batteries drain instantly. And in the sick bay, some claim to feel hands press against them from beneath the stretchers. A former tour guide once said, "This ship doesn't rest. The war ended, but the dead never left. They're still on duty." Some skeptics call it superstition. Others believe it's psychological, that the stories feed off each other. But what happens when hundreds of unrelated guests, over decades, describe the exact same faces, the same rooms, and the same sensations, without ever speaking to one another? What happens when a team of seasoned investigators enters the radio room, hears Morse code in a dead system, and captures a voice saying, "Ready for orders, sir." The Hornet won 9 battle stars. She survived kamikaze attacks, storms, and hellfire. But her greatest fight might still be raging inside, between the living and the long dead. And here's what no one can explain. Why do so many people feel watched as they walk her halls, even when they're alone? Who is the faceless man seen crawling from the lower decks, dripping wet, only to vanish at the foot of the stairs? And why, after all these years, do some swear they hear a bell ringing at midnight? There's no crew left aboard. But every night, the USS Hornet sounds like it's preparing for war. And if you listen closely, you might hear the past calling, and you might not like what it says. Haunted Place number 12, the Comedy Store, West Hollywood. Laughter hides many things. It masks pain, it covers shame, and in West Hollywood, on the iconic Sunset Strip, it hides the dead. This is not just a place for punchlines and applause. The Comedy Store, one of the most famous comedy clubs in America, sits on a foundation of blood, desperation, and death. Every night, people come here to laugh. But underneath the stage, something else stirs. Something that doesn't laugh. Something that never left. Before it became a shrine to stand-up legends, the building had another life. In the 1940s and 50s, it was known as Ciro's nightclub, a glittering hotspot for Hollywood's elite. Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, Humphrey Bogart, they all walked through those doors. But Ciro's was more than just a celebrity lounge. It was a gangster's playground. Mobsters ran operations from shadows. Extortion, racketeering, drugs, even murder. And what's now the basement of the Comedy Store was once a mob torture chamber. Witnesses, old staff members, performers, even psychics claim the basement still holds that energy. Men were beaten, killed, buried, forgotten. But their spirits? Not so easy to silence. Fast forward to the 1970s. The venue was transformed into the Comedy Store, where names like Robin Williams, David Letterman, Richard Pryor, and Sam Kinison would rise to fame. But even in the glow of success, something dark loomed in the background. One name haunts the building more than any other: Steve Lebetkin. A young comedian, talented, passionate, hungry. But when Mitzi Shore, the owner of the club, began paying only her headliners, Lebetkin, along with others, joined a bitter strike. He was blacklisted, banned, forgotten. And in 1979, Lebekin leapt to his death from the roof of the Continental Hyatt House across the street. He left behind a note. "My name is Steve Lebekin. I used to work at the Comedy Store." Many believe he never truly left. Performers have reported feeling watched while rehearsing alone. Stage lights flicker. Chairs move on their own. And staff often hear typing in empty offices, as if someone's still punching a joke into a forgotten script. In the upstairs green room, comics have felt a cold hand on their shoulder just before going on stage. No one's there. One night, a bartender was locking up when he heard guttural breathing behind him, heavy, angry, and not human. When he turned, nothing. But the bottles behind the bar shook in their racks. A female employee once reported seeing a man in a bomber jacket glaring at her from the hallway near the back stairs. His eyes furious. His expression frozen in time. She turned away for a split second. When she looked back, he was gone. Only the overwhelming stench of cigar smoke remained. That man is believed to be a mob victim, one of many who disappeared in the club's darker days. And then there's the basement. Even Mitzi Shore refused to go down there alone. So did the staff. Even during busy nights, people reported moans, whispers, and a distant sound of screaming from beneath the floorboards. One former employee said, "It's not a comedy club down there. It's a dungeon. The walls bleed history, and it hates being forgotten." Today, the laughs still echo through the halls. But so do the shadows. And maybe that's the irony of the Comedy Store. For every punchline that lands, a whisper answers from the dark. So next time you're in West Hollywood and you walk past that glowing sign on Sunset Boulevard, ask yourself, who's really watching the show? The audience? Or something far older, lurking in the basement, still laughing at a joke it never understood? Because of the Comedy Store, not all ghosts are just memories. Some are waiting for their turn on the mic. Haunted Place number 13, the Pico House, Los Angeles. In the heart of old Los Angeles, where the city's bones are still visible beneath the bustle, stands a relic of ambition and tragedy. Pico House was once the epitome of luxury, the gleaming gem of Southern California. But beneath its stately facades lie the whispers of horror and unrest. Built between 1869 and 1870 by Pio Pico, the last Mexican governor of Alta California, the Pico House was a grand Italianate hotel boasting nearly 80 elegant rooms, a courtyard fountain, exotic birds, and ornate staircases. Within a few years, the Southern Pacific Railroad shifted commerce southward. The building lost its grandeur, became an overcrowded boarding house, then fell into neglect. But darker chapters overshadowed its fall. Just steps outside Pico House in 1871, a violent anti-Chinese massacre claimed the lives of 18 to 23 Chinese immigrant men and boys, the victims of a brutal mob attack. Their agony didn't stay confined to the streets. It seeped into the building's foundations. Today, visitors report a chill wrapping around them on the upper floors. They hear footsteps echoing down the grand staircase, even when no one is there to tread its steps. Shadowy figures have been seen drifting across the balcony, disappearing around corners minutes later. Cold pockets of air materialize near the basement and underground tunnels, making the hair on your arms stand on end. In the Masonic Hall, ghost hunters claim to have heard a secretive knock, followed by sudden headaches and disorientation. A pressure in the air so oppressive visitors fled in panic. On a ghost tour in 2012, one investigator stood in the basement when he heard a screw clatter across the floor from above, with no one in sight. Another gave this chilling testament. "I felt, no, heard, someone creeping up behind me. My breath caught. I turned. Empty corridor. Many believe it's the angry spirits of those massacred who can't leave the site of their violence. Some suggest Pio Pico himself still wanders as lost empire's remains, eternally surveying a world he could no longer control. Here's where it turns sinister. Despite its closure to the public except during tours, The basement and tunnels hum with energy. Lights flicker when no electricity is running. Voices are caught on recording, voices that seem to answer back. One explorer described being pushed lightly on the back, as if a presence urged him deeper into the darkness. So here's the question that chills the blood. If those spirits remain trapped here, do they want our help? Or are they warning us to stay away? This building memorized every tragedy. Now it's teaching us a lesson, but only the brave or the foolish listen. Haunted Place number 14. Mission San Miguel Arcangel, San Miguel. Out here, the walls carry the weight of centuries, but some stones still bleed. This is Mission San Miguel Arcangel, a tranquil valley mission by day, but by night, it hides the echoes of brutal violence and ancient sorrow. Founded on July 25, 1797, by Franciscan Padre Fermin Lasuen, Mission San Miguel was meant to bring salvation to thousands of Salinan Indians in the region. For nearly 4 decades, it was a place of faith and forced conversion. Then came December 1848, a date soaked in blood. A gang of 6, escaped convicts, deserters, and thieves, arrived under the guise of gold traders. They entered the mission's living quarters and slaughtered 11 people. William Reed, his pregnant wife Maria Antonia, their children, several servants, including a midwife and her child, and others, one even unborn. They used axes, knives, and even a cutlass, mercilessly stating even a 4-year-old child who begged for mercy. That night, the mission wasn't just a house of God. It became a mass grave. 4 of the murderers were later hunted down, executed, or drowned. Today, atop the tranquility of restoration, the mission remains unsettled. Mysterious lights flicker inside empty rooms. Disembodied voices echo through the church and former living quarters. Colorless drafts swirl through corridors, cold spots in rooms closed for years. Visitors and guides report an oppressive feeling of being watched, especially near the original church and burial grounds. People claim to have seen shadowy shapes drifting through the quiet cloisters, and heard soft moans and whispers at dusk. And not just any shapes. Some recount glimpsing a friar's figure, silently pacing near the altar, his presence calm but sorrowful. Others claim they saw a young girl, bloodied and pale, searching for the family that was taken, her ghost reliving that final night. One small child even saw a Native American boy, crying and pointing to a hidden corner near the sacristy, only to vanish seconds later. A night tour guide once told this. The dusk air was perfect until I heard soft sobbing near the chapel. I followed it, but found only an empty pew. Yet behind me, I felt a cold presence as if someone had brushed past. Another visitor wrote. We entered the basement storage area, and a lamp swung violently on its own. The beams swept across the wall, revealing what looked like handprints in ancient mud. Then POMF, it stopped. Here's the worst part. Some say the mission never reset the graves. That beneath the current floor and ground, the bodies remain buried, souls unburied, unrest unheard. Restored, yes, but not at peace. So if justice can't be served, if prayer can't bring them solace, what keeps those spirits here? Are they trying to warn us or to warn others away? The stone holds their stories. The mission keeper lies near their bones. Some night, if you listen long enough, you might just hear them whisper, "It's not over." Haunted Place number 15, the Rispin Mansion, Capitola. You think curses are just for fairy tales. Then step through the gates of the Rispin Mansion and feel history unravel. Built in 1921 to 22 by San Francisco millionaire Henry Allen Rispin, this 22-room Spanish colonial revival estate was supposed to usher in a golden age for Capitola. A showpiece, a palace, perched above Soquel Creek. But the magic never came. Rispin poured fortune into the mansion and community, but tragedy struck quickly. His only son passed away, his marriage collapsed, and by the Great Depression, his wealth evaporated. He lost the mansion, descended into poverty, and died in 1947, buried unclaimed in a pauper's grave. The next owner, Robert Smith Hayes, inherited Rispin's doom and faced bankruptcy by 1936. Then, the Poor Clare's nuns took over in 1941, living in near silence and solitude until 1956. But even their faith couldn't stay the darkness. Each new owner stumbled. A 2009 fire gutted 75% of the mansion, just as developers planned to restore it. City Hall now calls it entombed with no plan but to let it stand, empty, sealed, and cursed. Those daring enough to visit talk of whispering dark presence in boarded-up rooms, cold, uninvited whispers. Ominous temperature changes, cold and warm spots drifting through locked corridors. Flashlights and motion lights flickering despite no power running. Shadowed figures glimpsed in upper rooms. Then gone. The sound of footsteps, the rhythm of drips, and a chilled heaviness, as if the walls themselves breathe hatred. In 2012, local ghost hunters led by psychics entered the sealed mansion. Their psychic detected both a protective nun and a malevolent force in the basement. An angry entity, a bully, not to be trifled with. They experienced what they describe as touches on hair and shoulders, unseen hands pushing them down staircases, and motion sensors triggered without movement. A team member was supposedly shoved, leaving a boot-shaped print on her clothing. Later, lights blinked on and off violently, just after the push. Here's the horrifying paradox. Sometimes, during Sunday daytime visits, the mansion feels warm, nostalgic, almost holy, an uncanny sense of peace. But visit again midweek, the mood shifts. Darkness flows through the halls. It hungers. So here's the question that claws at your mind. Are you walking into a ghost's vigil? Or trespassing into a malign entity's domain? Henry Rispin's own ruinous fate echoes in the collapsing ceilings. The fire didn't free the place. It anchored the darkness deeper. The Rispin Mansion isn't just haunted. It's a graveyard of dreams, a monument to suffering, and a trap waiting to claim the next curious soul. The only certainty is this: once you cross its threshold, the mansion never forgets. Which of these haunted places would you dare to enter alone? Have you ever visited one of these California legends? Have you ever walked the halls of the Queen Mary, stood in the shadow of Alcatraz, or peered through the broken windows of the Rispin Mansion? Drop your story in the comments. We read every single one. Comment haunted if you're still watching, and maybe you're braver than most. If you crave more bone-chilling tales like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because here at Real Ghost Stories, we bring the darkness to light. You've seen the haunted places. Now try to forget them. We dare you. Sleep well if you can.